Well, Lee, I know something is important to you is to speak regularly with the supporters, and you want to speak to them about the business side as well as the football side on a regular basis. Why do you feel that's important?
I think it's important fans understand what's going on with their club on the business side. Unfortunately, a lot of times the only time the business side of the club is discussed is when you're in deep, deep trouble. Then it becomes a big issue. I think if people understand what's going on along the way, they'll understand why some of the decisions are made the way they're made. And like I said, it's actually quite a complex business, a football club. It's some simple philosophies, but the business itself is complex. You've got a retail organization, it's a catering, it does publications, it does education, it does advertising and marketing, and of course it's the event, which is the main thing. You look at something like Marks and Spencer's, it's a retail operation. You look at JC Deco, it's just advertising and marketing, but really running a football club is like running 6 SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises.
Okay, one of the issues that you've come into, if you like, has been the issue of financial fair play. There have since been recent reports that it's going to be resolved by a commission. Is that the case?
That's just that's really a reiteration of how the rules work and how these things would be decided. That's what the Football League rules say. With any dispute between a club and the league, so that would be how it would ultimately be decided. Should the entities not come to an agreement with things, at the moment we still maintain dialogue, but ultimately, if we couldn't reach agreement, that would be how it would have to be done.
It is something that's been dragging on. Timescale wise, no clearer in that aspect?
Not, as I said, I think everybody recognizes this is such new ground for both Football League and for a club, that everybody wants to be dead sure about the precedent that's going to be set and what their actual position is, and be dead certain of what their position is going into it.
Okay, there has been cost cutting across the business side, the football side. It's been well documented, the changes that have had to be implemented. With that in mind, when we're looking to the new season, what sort of impact will that have on Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank and his ability to recruit players?
I think first of all, you have to go back to why I came here, which is, my philosophy is I want to create a sustainable football club. What that means to people varies. Fans will always want owners and directors who, quote, invest in the club. But fans have my experience is most fans have an interesting view on what investment actually means, because the average businessman, investment means I'm putting in money, I'm looking for a rate of return on that money. Whereas in football, it's a really old saying, but it's still so true. If you want to make a small fortune in football, start with a large one, because the fans' view is, you need to keep buying good players so that we can get into the Premier League. But keep ticket prices low, okay? Because I don't want to pay too much. So you keep investing and make sure we get good players. And then when we're in the Premier League, we got to keep investing so we can stay in the Premier League. So it's kind of a never-ending circle. One of my favorite things to do with directors is said, do you have any idea how much I know you love football, I know you love your club, do you know how much your season ticket actually costs you? And I've not done this with Ruben and Tony yet, but if he actually looked at they wrote off 160, they converted from that into equity. Forget the acquisition cost of the club, that's the additional 160 plus 60 million 2 years ago, so that's 220 million over the past 3 seasons, which means for each of them, he paid about 36 million a season for a season ticket. I can imagine, going home to the wife and saying, "I want to buy a season ticket at QPR." So, "Wow, how much is that, dear?" 36 million. It's like, that puts it into perspective. And so people will say, I don't like you should be reducing prices. 20 is plenty. I bet Ruben and Tony think that. I go, 20 is plenty. That's for 20,000. That would be plenty.
In terms then of that never-ending circle, how do you do
It's got to be broken, because I think and I'm not suggesting that Ruben and Tony are saying, we're getting sick and tired of funding it, but of course, you do get tired of writing a check out every month to keep the club ticking over. But, what you have to be careful of is a situation like Bolton, where, at that point, and I just said, look, enough is enough, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then the club are in big trouble. And, that's one of the issues I have with FFP, is like, well, you allege we're in breach of FFP. The whole thing is about financial sustainability. At Bolton, we're in FFP, but it was on the brink of administration. Is it really serving the purpose? This is a legitimate question. I like, that self-sustaining model to make sure all those SMEs I talked about before are producing the money to enable the club to go forward. And when we talk about SMEs, you know, yes, we run a retail business, yes, we run a catering and hospitality business, yes, we run a publications business, and yes, we run an education business in the academy. But the main business is about what happens between the white lines on the pitch. And no business, no football club anyway, has ever gone out of business because the catering operation wasn't very good or the retail operation wasn't very good. It's all down to what happens on the playing side. You know, that is the bulk of our business. And you know, like I say, if we were too much stationary, we're not going to tip it over the edge. But the player budget is a critical one, which really brings me back one point here. Player contracts, you know, I think that's something that Les has worked very hard on and trying to rebalance those contracts, because it's not rocket science, some of this stuff. I say it's a complex organizations, but the philosophies need to be, you know, pretty simple. And that is three components of a player's contract. Right? There's the basic guaranteed remuneration, there's what they usually get on a match-by-match basis, and there's often normally a player's incentive scheme as well on a win-loss and promotion. Players, of course, always want the guaranteed part to be the biggest part of the contract. Clubs are always trying to manage that risk and make as much of it on contingencies as possible. Just trying to find that right balance. It's also about, you know, in the Premier League, this is most particular, having the appropriate relegation clauses in it as well. You know, going up, players hate to say, no, I'm not taking a pay cut if I go down, but at the end of the day, I don't make a single save or try to score a single goal. We have to put the responsibility where it belongs, and those things, those players' contracts need to be in that condition so that they match the revenue streams coming in. Basically, the more money we're getting in, the more we can afford the players, and normally the more a player is making tends to be a relative correlation to his skills as well as a player. You know, and it all just dovetails into, you know, people will say, oh, it's just about the money, but at the end of the day, you know, if a player's going to come here for something that because he doesn't mind about the money, then fine. But I think you'll find most people in life, including football players, it is about the money and making sure that they're living a lifestyle that they want to live. So the impact on Jimmy is, okay, we have to get the players who are, you know, willing to take a bit more of a risk, having a bit more confidence in themselves, and saying, yeah, okay, I'll take more on the contingency side than the basic side, because that's really what it's going to have to be about. Now, obviously, we're looking at a scenario right now, and I always have to plan for a worst case scenario. I can't do the hope and a prayer scenario where we get promoted next year. I have to work on the doomsday scenario where we're running out of parachute payments in 3 years' time. Therefore, what about this year? What do the contracts look like next year? What do the contracts look like the year after that? And then doomsday is no parachute payment at all in 3 years' time. What does the club look like after that? So we're busy on the business side planning in that respect. And then the difficulty is the manager is always saying, I need to work, you know, 3 o'clock on Saturday is what I'm worried about. And I was like, yeah, but I need to worry about 3 o'clock Saturday, 3 years' time. So it's getting that balance right, you know, the players going in and making sure that we, while we are reining things in and we are cutting things and streamlining things, that we don't lose the service that those particular areas provide, that we don't lose what we do. Really, really difficult to say, cut costs but increase quality. Very difficult line to walk.